can be rough. And I think NASCAR in particular can be rough.
Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
I'm so happy to be here. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. You're saying you listened to Matt Tift and you enjoyed that one.
I did. I've been enjoying a lot of your episodes. I think it's also always cool when we know someone like Matt was in our NASCAR Next class and learning some of his perspectives, especially transitioning away from racing. I think something we've all been going through in some capacity. So it was really cool.
Yeah, for sure. So, as you know, I want to set kind of the background, tell the viewer where you grew up, where you were born, what your parents did for a living, kind of give me the childhood.
Okay, so the childhood. I'm from New York City, grew up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and my parents are two professionals. And I think my dad wanted to race when he was little and wasn't allowed to. And so somewhat lived vicariously through us. But my parents also, they have me, my sister, and my brother, and they were looking for an activity where we could all do something together. And my parents also wanted something where girls would be interacting with boys since we have to in the real world. I appreciate their progressiveness in that capacity.
Mm.
And so we started go karting, and there was a track about 2 hours outside of New York City. It was Oakland Valley Race Park, which Marco Andretti raced there, I think, Pauly Haraka. So there were a handful of like kind of people who kind of climbed to a certain level that were there. Santino Ferrucci also, his
Mm.
dad ended up buying the track eventually, and so that was his home track, backyard, I guess. And yeah, so that's how I got into go karting. But I, lived in New York, and then I went to college at Stanford, and then I moved to North Carolina. It's been 9 years that I've been living in the
Wow.
South. It's just wild.
Wow.
There's a lot of adult time in a very different culture, but all good. And then yeah, so that's kind of the off track stuff.
Well, before we go back to the childhood stuff, what has been, or I'm sure there's a lot of big shocks moving to the south. Would you ever move back north? Do you like the
Oh
south?
yeah. Oh, I can't wait. It's not going to happen just yet, but the future plans will definitely be to get back to New York City at some point. And then my husband's French, so he eventually wants to go back to France. So that's a long way away, but like I'm learning French, so I'll be ready.
Wow, that'll
Yeah.
be a big jump.
Yeah, I can't, I find that I can't think about that yet because it's a little too overwhelming. Like I'm just starting to get into past tense in speaking. So the idea to be an autonomous, independent adult there is a little far-fetched right now, but we'll get there eventually.
Wow. Okay, so you start go-kart racing with your brother and sister,
Hmm.
and when does it start to click or take off or go, okay, Julie is the one who's fast and winning races?
Yeah, so I remember it took until my seventh race to win in a go-kart. It was a little cadet go-kart, and we started national go-kart racing kind of quickly. And so by the time I was 12, I never won a national go-kart championship, but I was on the podium, won races. And so I was doing that. And I think when I was 12 or 13, my parents had read about John Edwards, who raced for Red Bull and then did sports cars. And he had gotten into the Skip Barber racing series when he was 12. And so my parents, being competitive, were like, if this child can do it, our child can do it. And I loved it. And every year my parents asked me, did I still want to dedicate a lot of time? Did I want to miss friends' birthdays? Did I want to focus on it? And I did. So started racing in that, won a championship when I was 14. And I think that was like, all right, she's not just good at go-karting, she's good at cars. And that was Formula cars, and did that for a little bit, and then switched over to oval racing when I was 16. Did a lot of part-time racing in the Ford Focus midgets, which are those funky, they're kind of funky, like the sprint cars, so like funky,
Oh,
high center
yeah.
of
Yeah,
gravity, open wheel on asphalt, not on dirt.
right.
Um,
I never did any of the Skip Barber stuff, but like a lot of people came out of that. And I remember like I did the Bridgestone thing at Mossport. I think I was, yeah, 13 or 14, and it was, no, it was probably 12, I guess. And, it was a big jump. It was like, oh shit, I'm in a full size car here. But, you know, it's so similar to go-karts that you were probably quick right away in the Skip Barber stuff, no?
No, I
Okay.
wasn't. Well, also, so first part, so one thing that I'll never forget is that in go-karts when you get onto the straightaway, in order to kind of increase the ascent of your RPMs, a lot of people will kind of jump out of their seat to get the axle lighter and get the wheel spinning. I will never forget at Lime Rock Park coming down on the last corner and trying to like jump in my seat just out of instinct of getting onto a straightaway. And, I was a very small 13-year-old and like strapped in really tight with this massive, like poured car seat that went completely underneath me. Like I needed a lot of assistance and it just like ripped at my collarbones and it was awful. So, no, but the story I've become comfortable telling is that my first Skip Barber race after doing the 3-day racing school and the 2-day racing school was at Lime Rock in October in the rain. And for those who haven't been on Lime Rock, it was at least extremely treacherous in the rain and really slippery. And I just remember that Parker Kligerman was racing that race and he won the race and he lapped me twice in the rain.
Ooh.
And it was so I wasn't even like that ashamed of myself. I was just so terrified the whole time I was on track because it was so different to go fast in a heavy car on a slippery surface. But I realized I had some work to do. So the next year I came back and won my next race and then won the championship. So just needed that humble beginning to give myself the kick in the ass that I needed.
Right, right. So why did stock car racing happen from that trajectory? That's like an IndyCar or Formula One trajectory.
Yeah, so after Skip Barber, I was 15, and at that time, there were a really limited number of racing series, Formula car racing series that a 15-year-old could do.
Hmm.
And we did Formula BMW USA, which doesn't exist anymore, but we were the support race for F1 in Montreal and for Indy when they raced there, and raced at a bunch of really cool tracks, but it was really expensive. My parents didn't have the budget to be on a really good team, and when we got done with that year and we're kind of not super happy with how much money was spent and like the quality that we got because like my two other teammates and I had all won a championship the year before and we were constantly at the back. So I think my parents and I got to learn more about the business side of racing and just like what goes into it. And it was cheaper to go oval racing, got a lot more racing in.
Hmm.
And it was something that I think Lynn St. James had introduced me to Bob East, who runs the midgets, and so I was able to race for him in Indiana and like leave school on a Tuesday night and race on Wednesday and then fly back. And so it was kind of a mix of cost and just frequency and knowing that we were in the States. I think my parents never loved the idea of helping me towards IndyCar, just being on ovals in an open wheel car. I think they always thought was a little riskier than they necessarily needed to be. And then so just started learning about that, and it allowed for a lot of part-time racing throughout high school and college, which is what I ended up doing.
Right. So you ran a late model, and during that time, how are you conceptualizing racing? Is it like, hey, this is something I want to, pursue as long as I can, or is it, oh no, I want to race cup, I want to make a living at it?
That's a great question. I think I always knew that I wanted to keep pursuing racing and try to make a living. Like it really didn't really sink in that wouldn't happen until like after the 2020 season, which I think is a little naivete on my part, and just also, working so hard for a dream that you're trying to make happen that you've dedicated like your whole life to. But no, so I also always knew that my parents were limited in the funding that they could provide. And so I always spent a bunch of time on the business side, and I knew I wanted to go to school. I knew that no matter what, even if I made it to the highest levels of racing, I would probably stop by my mid 30s at some point because, I do want a family eventually, right? I knew that there was going to be an end. And so I was interested in other stuff. But yeah, I think by the time I graduated, like I went through college trying to learn as much as I could about as many things as I could that I could then apply to racing, building a brand, figuring out how to make a living that would allow me to keep sponsorship hunting and all that stuff. And I knew that I was always going to move to Charlotte. Which I
Right.
gotta say, after being in the Bay Area for 4 years in like the most perfect weather and like at a great school and everything, I was like, oh, the South, Charlotte. Okay, it's a jump.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. California has the best weather in the world.
It really does. There might be other
So,
problems with it, but it does have really beautiful weather and like
yeah,
great scenery.
yeah, exactly. You're gonna make the trade maybe for North Carolina as far as some things there as far as weather and culture. But so during school, what did you take at school and university if you're Canadian, college, I guess if you're American?
That's right. Those
Yeah.
cultural differences. So I studied something called science, technology, and society. It was really interdisciplinary. It meant that I took a technical route and I got a bachelor of science, but it was a lot of like entry and second level classes in a lot of different subjects. So everything from communications and history and English classes to computer science and mechanical engineering design. And I learned I was not good at natural sciences, so I took minimal class of those. But it really just allowed me to follow my curiosities. And like I took one of my favorite classes was a graphic novel course, so like comic books and like full on books that are written with graphics. And it was just so cool, and to see how the words and the images mix. So I've always enjoyed learning and all of that, so it was a pretty perfect way to go through. And I knew I didn't want to do labs. I knew I didn't want to do that. I've never been a straight A student, so I also knew that there were limitations academically, and but I always worked hard. So yeah, that's what I did.
So you've already made this decision before you graduate college that you're moving to North Carolina. Had you already, and then, the path to the beginning path to NASCAR is the K&N series. Had you already kind of set up that K&N deal before you moved?
No, so I had known, like, I had started, and I look back and I kind of not cringe because I was learning, but like look at some of the sponsorship pitches I did while trying to pitch K&N, because I started doing that in college and was not successful at it. But I graduated. When I graduated, I was still racing some Legends cars, which were super fun, and they do
Yeah.
that in Charlotte Motor Speedway a lot, and some of the little short tracks in the Charlotte area. And then I raced the limited late models with Lee and won that championship. And when I did that, that was a nice boost in terms of like establishing myself within the NASCAR audience, of at least knowing how to race and be competitive and put together a full season. And then the year after that, I had worked with Bill McAnally a little bit while I was in college running late models, but then we were able to do the K&N West. I was the fourth car assigned to the 2016 season.
Right. And how does that deal work? Like, I remember you had like a million sponsors on your suit and Toyota on the car and different sponsors. Like, how, like, if you don't mind, like, take me through the inner workings of that deal with Bill.
It was still majority pay to play at that point. And
Right.
I think, with some of the drivers, like with Todd there and Riley there, and Chris might have been a little different, but I think for the most part, we were mostly pay to play. And there were some sponsor obligations and there was some help, but it was still a parental duty.
Sure. Did you find any of your own money that season?
I did, but not through traditional sponsorship. I did through different like branded partnerships, and I had started my keynote speaking career at that point, and so some of that money I was able to put towards it. But um, it was it was crazy how much money was being thrown at so many young drivers, and like because we're about the same age. Like I was old in that
Right.
group.
Yeah.
Like Todd Gilliland, I think, was 16 at the time, and I was 23 or 24, whatever it was, and but like there were people flying private to the tracks. Like
Yeah.
I'm like I'm doing my connection flight through Seattle to get to Spokane. Like woohoo!
Yeah, absolutely. So you're living in Charlotte. You now know, like, we did that NASCAR Next kind of deal, and I guess you were kind of in it, living there. I didn't really know much about it and learned a lot during that year, but you saw that the steps were okay. I need to, if I'm gonna do this, I now need a truck ride next year, an Xfinity ride a year or two later, and a Cup ride, however many years after that. How far did you go down that road, and then where did that kind of stall out?
Yeah, so we obviously have that perfect plan of how it's going to work. And for the second year of K&N, it was going to be more expensive to go back to Bill. And quite honestly, knowing that Todd was there and his dad was so involved, like I thought it would be hard to have a fair chance on the team. I think that's fair to say. And so we're looking around, and we had the Sunrise deal, and that whole year was really bad. And like Michael Self was my teammate, and we both just were pretty bad for most of the season. And it was a very weird season. So that was a little disheartening that after having momentum of having gotten fourth in the K&N points, like for reference, I like to say is like I was one place behind Noah Gregson, and
Yeah.
it was his second year. And so it was pretty disheartening to have such a terrible year with so many mechanical failures and weird things happening. But after that, my parents had like fully pulled out of funding. And so, I was able to get some funding to run a handful of Pinty series at that level. And those were, ran for Joey and, got seat time, but everyone knew it was not like a top tier car. And that was probably the first like really hard time where it's like, okay, I clearly don't have the budget. I can't keep going. And what was disappointing was that, before Brad Keselowski Racing had shut down, we were talking with them and they were one of the teams that was providing a lot of funding for drivers to go racing. And like Daniel Hemrick went through there and everything. So when they shut down, there was also like, ooh, double whammy, like kind of a lot of stuff is not panning out the way it could have, knowing it wasn't necessarily going to. But so after that, yeah, 2018, 2019 were partial seasons in the Pinty series, which it was cool to race up there. Didn't, wasn't the best results ever. And, being a part-time driver is always a little challenging. But once I realized that I was going to be able to fund the Euro NASCAR series for a year in 2020, I was stoked. So I was like, oh my God, we're going full-time racing again. We're going to be on a great team, back to road course racing, which I love. And then the pandemic happened. So that still raced there, but it was very truncated. It was a very challenging season to live there for 3 months because travel was so funky. Once I flew over there, I was like, I got to stay in Europe. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. So I ended up living with my now husband's French family that does not speak English for 3 months. And he couldn't go there because he was on visa and he couldn't get back into the States if he left. So it was a very challenging but fun year. But after that, in 2021, that team didn't race again. And that was kind of where I was like, all right, I think my career is officially dwindling down.
Sure. What was the NASCAR Euro Series like? I'm always curious. I'm always like, oh, should I want to race Brands Hatch or something.
For me, I look back and when I think of like what the most fun racing has been, it's up there on being really great. Because one thing I never loved about stock cars on a road course in the US or in Canada is that our cars are set up, the K&N, Xfinity, whatever it is, to have a lot of body roll. And so it kind of feels that way. It feels like the whole car just like lops over when you're going through a corner. And I never felt super confident with that kind of characteristic. And so the Euro NASCAR car is really stiff and it's also a little bit lighter. So it just feels nimble and really reactive. And so I thought it was a lot of fun. They also have a pretty strict like no contact policy. If you make avoidable contact, you get penalized. And so it means that you're really forced to be really good at your racecraft. And I've always liked that better. I don't know if it's because I started in open wheel stuff, but I kind of feel like anyone can knock someone out of the way for the win. But to have to prove that you can get past cleanly, it just made for really enjoyable and really competitive racing. So if you can do it, I highly recommend it. It is a fun series.
Okay. Yeah, Alon and I always talk about trading rides for a race.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that
Yeah.
would be
No, and it was great.
okay.
It was really cool. I think we didn't get to experience the atmosphere of the fans, but they seem really cool because they were completely closed off and the garage really had strict protocols for COVID. So socially, I didn't get a sense of the field, but I've heard it's fantastic.
Right. So during your whole racing career, you are keynote speaking. How did that come about? Was it one event that you were invited to and you went, "Oh, I kind of like this?"
Yeah, basically. So when I was at Stanford, they asked me to give a talk during their TEDx event. So Stanford had every year had a TEDx Stanford event. They asked me when I was a junior, but I couldn't do it because the Survivor live taping of the finale for the season that I had been on was filming. So I had to ask if they would have me the following year, and they said maybe. And I was crossing my fingers. And I got to work with a communications coach that they brought in. So I got to get really dedicated time to learn how to read my audience and tell a story and create this narrative arc. And I got on stage and I was so nervous. My talk I had practiced it at 12 minutes every time. And I get on stage and it was 8.5 minutes. I just spoke so quickly, but I spoke clearly. I delivered everything I was supposed to. I made people laugh, which is an incredibly intoxicating feeling when you make a whole audience laugh. And I knew that I had sparked some conversations between people and that the content I was delivering was interesting. And I was like, well, I know that you can get paid doing this. And I now have the tools to know how to put together a good story. until I left college knowing like I'm going to try to see if I can make a living this way. Because, even this year I've had about 14 gigs, and it just means that I have a lot of other time to do stuff. And, it was a process to build it up to a sustainable career. But yeah, I about a year after graduating, I pitched myself for my first speaking event. I just Googled women's leadership conferences, and I sent my really pretty packaged TEDx talk, and someone wanted to hire me pretty quickly. So I got a little bit lucky with that.
Right, right. That's great. Let's go back to Survivor. How did you end up on Survivor?
So I applied just like everyone else, thinking like, again, throughout college, I always thought like, how can I do stuff that helps my racing career, helps my publicity, which I've learned it's not helped that much, but that's okay. But I applied, and I happened to fit some brief that I guess they were looking for, and it was so hard, and I didn't know until like 2 weeks before having to fly to the Philippines that I had made it. And it was, the first thing people ask is it real? And it is 100% miserably real. And I think they're on season 45 or something now, and it wouldn't make it this far if it was scripted. And I was convinced that we would get water bottles at some point to hydrate, and we don't. I got a terrible, terrible sunburn on my whole body, but really on my face, like where I could see the blister,
Oh,
like
geez.
right underneath my eye. It was awful. And yeah, no, it was very cool, very challenging. I'm a little competitive and will forever be bitter that it was half people who had played before, half new people, because that's just so unfair. But it was
Right.
great. It was great.
Hmm. Would you do it again?
I have applied several times to do it
Okay.
again, and I
Okay.
have been hardcore ignored every time.
Right.
It's
Didn't make
just,
enough of a splash.
oh no, no, I got such the boring edit. Like I got nervous because you're playing for $1 million, and I was aware that by being a Stanford student and from New York and being a race car driver, like there's a certain air of pretentiousness that could come along with that. And I was like, well, why, if I play as well as like a single parent or something, would they give me $1 million? So I kind of concealed some stuff about myself, and then realized that it's hard to contribute to a conversation if you're worried about not blowing your cover that you've been deceiving people, and the whole
Hmm.
game is deception. And I was the youngest person there. I was 20 years old, and everyone was miserable. Like it's just they find really awful people to be on that show. And so I was like, this isn't going well. I don't
Yeah.
like anyone. And then I got a pretty searing, boring edit. So
Yeah, that's the way it goes. You're at the mercy of the editors on those
yeah,
shows.
I will say I feel like they make people caricatures of themselves, but I don't feel like anything was made up.
Right.
From what I know of anyone else, it's like what you give, and some people know how to give the producers stuff that they can work with really well,
Hmm.
and some of us do not. And
Right.
then we learn the hard way in front of 9 million people.
Right. So you did was it this past season you ran the one or two Xfinity races? You raced Daytona?
Yeah, and I did not race Daytona. I raced
Okay.
Homestead. But yeah, I
Homestead.
raced I was able to get real sponsorship to go run 2 Xfinity races, which I was very proud of myself.
Yeah.
And the whole thing, like being able to get the funding, working with the team, making both the races. So it was at New Hampshire, which I had raced at a few times in Pinty's and in K&N, and every time was absolutely horrible. And honestly, the Xfinity race ended up being horrible because Allgaier put me in the wall. But it was really cool. Made it in. I say I've never been so proud of qualifying 32nd in my life. But dude, it's terrifying to go out because like you get no practice, right? It's 20
Right.
minutes of practice, and then you have one lap to qualify. And I'm so glad I didn't know how hard it was going to be, because and I hadn't raced in a little while, but luckily I had the confidence. But it is so hard, and like you pull out for practice, and like everyone's already full speed when I pull out. It's like I don't even know where my break point is. Like I kind of have an idea, and then I know I have to get deeper, and it was really, really hard. Homestead was a lot easier as a track, although it was hard to get up by the wall. I found that really, really challenging.
Sure.
Physically, like driving a mile and a half was so much easier because you have these long straightaways where you're just like, all right, deep breath, we got this, and none of the turns are super tight. So in some ways, that felt it felt like a much shorter race than like the half race I ran at New Hampshire.
Right, right. Yeah, I can't imagine jumping in that series with no practice. Like, it'd be so hard. Did you prepare on a simulator?
I did prepare on a simulator. I watched a lot of videos. I looked at data. I talked with the team a lot. We had done a test day at Motor Mile, which Motor Mile is a 0.4 mile pretty banked track, and New Hampshire is a 1 mile flat track, so very different, very
Yeah.
very different. And the test day got cut a little short, but at least I knew kind of what the car felt like. But yeah, I did as much prep as I could, but it clearly like you can always do more. And I was stuck because I was only licensed for up to a mile, so that was really the only track that they said that I could race on. And I got approved for a mile and a half, and then after Homestead approved for super speedways, which I don't personally have any strong desire to get on a super speedway. If I'm honest, like it seems really gnarly.
That's the only other than like racing a truck at Coda or Xfinity car at Coda. That's what I want to do. I'd want to go run Talladega in a truck. Just
You're
drafting and
ballsier than I am.
holding it flat out. That's probably the only thing stopping me though is the prospect of ending up in the grandstands.
Yeah, it's like I know that it's safe. Like I objectively know that it's pretty safe, and people have had some really rough crashes and walk away. But I don't know if it's like being in my 30s and like, you know what, it's too much. But yeah, so what have you done in the national series? Because you've done some trucks, right?
Just just the trucks at Moseport. I've run 3 of those. I hope they come back. I don't think I figured it out until after my last race there. Just how different those radial tires are and the truck arms, compared to the Pinty's car. It's like
So
you've got
different,
to
I'm sure.
drive it in slow and just get off the corner, whereas the Pinty's car, you can drive it in like a Formula car and, just correct. But those radial tires, like you lose grip and you're out of it. You've got
Yeah,
you've got no grip for the whole corner. And then I did the Cup race with
that's right.
at the Glen, and that was pretty fun. Didn't get practice because the battery fell out. I was like, oh, I don't need practice anyways. Uh,
I know how to turn left and right.
yeah, yeah. It was really cool. Any of those shots you get at it, you lose sleep for a week. Like you get PTSD. You're like, oh, I could have done so many things differently, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so Watkins Glen is one track that I've not been on because when Skip Barber raced there, I was I think the minimum age was 18 at the time, so I couldn't race there. But yeah, my bucket list items, and like I don't consider myself retired, I'm just not pursuing racing full time, but still want to get on Laguna Seca, still want to get on Watkins Glen. I think those are the big ones that I have yet to get on. Do
Yeah.
you have bucket list items?
Bucket list items. I want to do some sports car racing. I want to run Daytona.
That too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Le Mans would be cool, but I think Daytona's more attainable.
Yeah.
And there's
Have
so
you
many
done any
tracks.
sports car racing?
That's a good question. Not really. No.
Yeah.
I love watching the MX5 series. I think that's badass. But yeah, like Daytona, and then all these tracks that I haven't raced on, like Lime Rock, VIR, Road America, like those, Mid Ohio. I need to run those tracks before I'm 40.
You do.
Yeah.
You do. Yeah. Lime Rock's super special. VIR was where I got my first Skippy win, and I got to then do it in a Legends car, which that was fun. We did the South Course in a Legends car. I did a test day in a late model on the North Course. I mean, it's just such a cool track.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, can we dive into a little bit of the content of your keynote stuff? I assume
Yeah.
you rely a little bit on your racing, and you want to keep racing to be, have fresh stories and fresh, that you are still a race car driver for your keynote talks, right?
Yeah, so that's an interesting. Yes, like theoretically, that's what I've always thought about. What my agent thinks is that like the content stands on its own pretty
Mm,
well. And so, and a lot of the stories, so for background, like I definitely fall under the general motivation, inspiration, entertainment category. So if a company or an association, they have just like an opening keynote that's just meant to pump people up, a lot, that's what I'll get hired for, not a
right.
technical discussion. And so, I like my themes revolve around taking ownership or perseverance or like leadership. That's a big one. And I think the team dynamic of racing is with the driver, especially, is like a really prime way to talk about leadership and motivating a team and everything. But I also talk about like embracing discomfort, and I'll talk about male allies. I have a more women's focused talk about more specific gendered things that I've gone through. And a lot of the stories really are rooted in go-karting and early days of racing cars, because they're just these big formative lessons that I learned. But I'm working on like how to, I do enjoy a lot of stand-up comedians, and so seeing how they kind of engage an audience and their body language and how they change their tone a little bit, or how you almost like flirt with the audience a little bit with how you're delivering your content, like learning how to do that, I think makes the content help stand alone, as I said, without being an active racer. And so I'll always be a race car. I'll always have two championships, but I don't necessarily think that I need to stay active to keep doing that, because the storytelling, I've learned it's something that I'm getting kind of good at. So, which is really reassuring to have.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. What are your thoughts on, I guess the W series, the women's series in racing, and just, and you probably know better than I do. There's not a whole lot of sports where men and women compete together.
Yeah. Yeah. So I will be the first to admit that when the W Series was announced, I was really not a supporter of it. I love that racing is co-ed. I love that, it's one of the few competitive arenas where men and women can more or less compete equally. And do I think that Formula One might be a little hard for some women, especially smaller women? Yeah, I do. I think that's such a high level of physical strength and sheer downforce that they're dealing with. I'm sure women could do it.
Hmm.
But besides that, like in a stock car, I think there's no real advantage to being a guy over being a woman. And so, anyway, I think it's fair. And I was adamantly against it until someone, and I forget who it was, they made the point that at least by showcasing a bunch of women racing, you are normalizing having a lot of women competing in one race, and that for optics and for normalizing that could be really good. And so I totally get that argument, and I think if it's a means to an end to help women participate more, I think that that's great. I think where you get in trouble is what happened, that the business model wasn't sustainable and it didn't work out, and optics could be that there wasn't enough support for people don't want to watch women in racing or whatever it is. And I think we're seeing that a lot of women's sports do have a big audience, and it's about helping support it and growing. So at the end of the day, mixed. I have mixed feelings about it. I'm excited to see where F1 Academy goes, and the fact that they're built in with Liberty Media and Formula One, and they're tying in the teams. Um, I'm intrigued to see it, but I think, as you know, because racing's so expensive, you have that barrier anyway, and so then to have other barriers just makes it that much harder. Um, but I'd love to be proven wrong that it's a great thing to do, so that we can get more women in racing, because that is something I'm passionate about. And we'll see. We will see it. I think they just announced that for the COTA race for F1 Academy, that the ESPN is going to be broadcasting it. So I think that's
Cool.
pretty major. Like I think it was announced today, and so we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. Why do you think there are so few women in racing?
I think I'm sure there are a bunch of reasons. I think one, if you just look at the resources, if a family can put resources towards one kid to go racing, I think most parents will just assume that the boy wants to do it, or that the
Right.
boy might show more interest. I really believe in the sentiment, like if she can see it, she can be it. And it's amazing throughout my career how many girls just didn't know that girls could race because they don't even see it. So I think there's that kind of, just for kids at least, knowing what's out there. Um, I think also it can be a pretty uncomfortable culture to be in. Like being the other in any culture is
Sure.
tough, and I think I've had a pretty decent experience overall, but I still have been deeply uncomfortable at times. I've had to lean on humor and trying to relate to people. And it's just like, it can be rough. And I think NASCAR in particular can be rough. But then I saw it in the Euro Series too, and it's a different flavor of weird. But you can be uncomfortable, um, and yeah, and what I find is kind of tough, and I see this with a lot of women in racing, is that like you kind of get pigeonholed into either like the attractive and then not a good racer, or
Yeah.
like a good racer and then people comment on like not being attractive. And it's like, it's not exclusively, but it's like you're pigeonholed into these two things, and it's like, well, neither is really a recipe for success. And so I don't know, there are little things. I think everyone's experience is different, but I think culturally, I think financially, I think also now getting a little bit older, realizing like biological timelines, and especially if you're someone who expects to have kids when you're in your 20s, that makes it hard to keep being a race car driver. So I think there's some element of all of that. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. An interesting thought, and it averages mean nothing for the individual, right? I know a guy who was on the board for Sports Canada, and he knows nothing about racing, and he was asking me about, are there girls in racing? I gave him the correct answer, very few.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, is it separated? Because it should be. And I go, well, what do you mean? Why? He's like, well, I just went through all this data, and even darts is separated by gender, because
Hmm.
on average men have better hand-eye coordination. And I never thought of it like that. But all of these averages, again, when you're looking at elite sports, mean nothing for the individual. you know
Yeah.
you know
Yeah, totally. And what's also interesting is that, especially as we've seen more attempts at women, at gendered racing series, is like, because of how much goes into them, like upstarting a new
oh,
division or a whole, like, is not going to happen. But also there's still not enough women at the grassroots level to comprise a full series. um, and I think what makes racing harder also is that it's so inaccessible to a lot of people. Like, this, like, you grow up and you learn how to play basketball, you learn how to play baseball, you learn how to run track, you learn how to throw darts, like whatever it might be,
yeah,
and you get a sense of what that's like. But like, if you're living in a city, or if you're living in a random place that doesn't have a racetrack nearby, or go-karting, your parents aren't taking you to it, like, there's no way to kind of know. And so you're already having a smaller potential talent pool for racing, just because it is inaccessible.
for sure, for sure. And I think interest plays into that too. um, you know if you look at, say, I think a lot of people in the future will come to racing through the simulator. And
Mm-hmm.
again, on average, meaning nothing for the individual, but on average, boys play video games at a staggering rate in comparison to girls.
Yeah.
And but the simulator is a great equalizer for someone who doesn't have the funding, and they can go and hone their craft and try and get an opportunity and get a ride. We've seen it happen a few
Mm-hmm.
times, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think, like, with anything like, or with something like simulator work, I totally agree that like the technology and the being able to participate is an equalizer. But we've seen that like any kind of online chat room or anything that's
Oh,
especially male, like Discord, is awful.
right.
And I have plenty of women who I know, especially like when I was dabbling in the Web3 space and just learning about NFTs and blockchain and everything. I had a lot of women who told me that they joined and just had like a gender neutral name, or just their initials or whatever, and people just assumed that they were men. And then when other women joined or something, like, it was awful. So again, like, it is an equalizer, but part of the reason a lot of girls don't get into video games is also because it's a really
Oh,
scary and
yeah.
dangerous place. So it just sucks that like nothing operates in a silo, and like it all kind of comes together that way. But yeah, simulators are huge. And I know there's a little bit of an effort, especially with some European based groups, to try to encourage more girls to get into simulator work, and um, as a way to get that quote unquote seat time, which I've never done a lot of. I've I've never played video games growing up, but it's a totally different feel.
Yeah, yeah. I don't put a whole lot in the simulator, but I guess it works for some people. So you've started a podcast now. What was the impetus for that?
I did. So, if I'm honest, Julia Landauer came out of wanting to have additional content after the keynotes. A bunch of people in my audience was like, "Oh, have you written a book? Oh, like, can we see more of you?" And I'll be the first to admit I'm not fantastic at social media, and I don't love content creation in that capacity. But oral storytelling is something that I do really like, and
Hmm.
so it's been a experimental period and kind of learning what sticks, what people like. I think I know how I want to do my second season a little differently. But it's a lot of solo podcasts talking about themes that could naturally complement my keynote themes. And then I've started incorporating guests, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'm going to shift some things for next season to make it a little more informal, conversational, a little more like I feel like I feel better with when I'm either a guest on a podcast or interviewing, and it's more of that conversation. So how do I translate that into an individual setting? You know,
Right. Right. Are you do you have designs on writing a book?
that's a great question. I think I have the content to. Do I think that right now I could have something that would be differentiated enough? No. And I don't love writing enough, I think. And I'm not quite ready to invest in a ghostwriter. But yeah, people ask that. I don't know. I feel like a lot of people or athletes or public figures in some capacity like want to have that thing, that token book that they've written.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know if it's in my immediate future.
Hmm.
What about you? Would you write a book?
Probably the same answer. Yeah. Yeah, one day maybe. Uh, Writing seems miserable.
Yeah. I would love to do a children's book,
Okay.
if I'm honest. Like, I would love to do, again, because I love that graphic novel class that I took so much, even though I'm not an artist and I'm not good at drawing, I don't enjoy drawing or anything, to work with an artist to kind of write a children's story that has that visual component, I think would be really fun. But I'm not going to do that just yet.
Right. You got to wait till you have kids.
I feel like, I even tried, like, because I thought about it for a while and I bought a bunch of children's books to read through them. And I clearly don't have the flow yet of, like, how to write for a certain age.
Right.
So, yeah, maybe that's a later thing. I guess do you guys have a bunch of children's books too, right? Are you?
Yeah, yeah, I read children's books every night. Dr. Seuss is good. Anything that you can kind of sing-songy is good.
The rhyming sing song, I've realized how important that is and how not naturally talented I am at that. So,
Right, right. My buddy wrote a children's book. He's got two kids, and it's like the ABCs of hockey. A is for whatever, Z is for Zamboni, kind of thing.
mm,
Yeah, yeah,
oh,
it's
that's
good.
smart. Yeah, and
Yeah,
I've always thought, like, how could I incorporate racing into something? And I'm just not sure yet. But it would
right.
be fun down the road.
So I listened to a bunch of your podcasts. I was driving around Southern Ontario this morning. I really enjoyed your Heroes podcast,
Mm,
and
yeah,
I love the why Paul Newman is one of your heroes. And I
yeah.
think you and I are probably similar in that, not solely pursuing racing, but just following what your interests are and trying, your best to be a Renaissance man or woman.
Yeah, I mean, I maybe I've always romanticized him, but yeah, like the fact that he was an actor and pursued that and had a really dedicated family life and pursued racing and then charitable work is like it was an early introduction that you don't have to fit yourself in one box. And I've never felt like I fit in one box, especially like being a New Yorker in racing, being a woman in racing, like all this stuff, being a Stanford student who did not want to go into tech or finance and was going to move to Charlotte, right? Like never really fit in the box. And so that mindset of like, okay, we're going to do what we want, I just really appreciated that and done with class and style. And so I'm glad you like that. But I think it goes back to, again, I know that I texted you this, but with, I think it was Matt's episode where talking about transitioning from pursuing something professionally to going at it as an enthusiast, you had mentioned that being an enthusiast has longevity. And when you said that, I was just like, oh my God, that is so brilliant. That is such a nice like shift to think about it, especially when it's something you've been pursuing for a while. But you're right, like you can be a very accomplished and masterful enthusiast in whatever you're doing. And so I love that. So thank you. That was a big pick me up that I didn't know I needed.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, you go to any local short track and there's a guy there who's dominating. There's however many scratch golfers out at courses who are, putting in as much time as anyone, and, they're just playing with their buddies on the weekend and getting the same enjoyment out of it, really.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure you and I are the same way in that it's amazing and it feels so good to put together a deal that the sponsors paid for everything. You're competing, like that's an aspect that you don't get as a simple enthusiast, but the enthusiast thing, like you can do it forever. And I think that's probably Paul, like going back to Paul Newman, like he raced Trans Am till he was 82, right? Like that is, he was truly an enthusiast when he wasn't a professional anymore, and probably started when he was 50, right? As an enthusiast.
Yeah. Well, and I think in that kind of like, when thinking, like, because I too also want to get in sports cars and see what that's like, and to go racing for fun, again, just purely for fun. Focus on kind of next phase of my career a little bit and get a little more money saved up to make that a little more attainable. But like I can totally do that later. And even like, we've picked up playing tennis and have dedicated to my husband and I to learning skills and how to do it properly and working with our friends, and we're going to join a class and can be really competitive with each other there. And you can keep building and keep getting better and keep improving. And especially I like having a competitive outlet. So, and we're well matched. We have different strengths and weaknesses that allow us to play a game together pretty well. So
That's good.
yeah.
That's good. The other podcast I enjoyed of yours, and it really hit home with me as well, is being a recovering external validation junkie.
Right. Oh, I'm so
Especially,
glad to hear that.
yeah, especially having like a bunch of successes as a young kid, and those successes being praised. I think it was Andrew Huberman, his podcast, talking about how important it is to praise kids on their effort as opposed to their results.
I think I listened to the same one. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was like, oof, I, have been paralyzed of, from trying new things because you're not going to succeed at it right away, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it's that also. And I think it's also, it becomes kind of humbling. Like for me, what I realize is like throughout, like right around NASCAR next, so 2016, 2017, 2018, like if I was listening to a podcast and I thought I would be a good fit for it, I would pitch, and I almost got all of the ones that I wanted to do, like these big podcasts. And then like over the last couple of years where it's like shifting the focus, like having new podcasts that come out and trying to pitch myself or having my agent pitch me, and like there was no traction. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm not anymore. Like this is
Yeah.
really sad. And it extended back to being in school also, because being the race car driver in school, like for any class that you had to apply to, I put something about race car driving and I pretty much got all the classes I wanted it. And I just realized like how much of a mind it was to realize like, okay, you're not going to get everything that you want. And even if you think that it's a perfect fit, it's not going to work. So yeah, it was super humbling, and coming to terms with that and start trying to be more present and appreciative of what I do have. It's been a really interesting growing few years, I think.
Yeah, it's a process. So what does the future hold for you for racing? Are you still trying to pitch the odd race here and there?
I'm not pitching so much, but through a few relationships I have, like especially in the Euro Series, there have been some discussions about potentially going over and doing a one-off. I don't think it's going to happen this year, but I'm not entirely sure. We talk about buying a go-kart and trying to just like have a nice two-stroke go-kart up at Trackhouse Motorplex now. Ben and I are not radically different in waist size, so I think we can share a seat pretty comfortably and do that. But I'm not entirely sure for racing. I might, people have approached about some kind of coaching with some specific programs, which maybe, I'm not sure. But we'll see. I've got a few things that I'm working on that hopefully will come to fruition, racing adjacent, I would say,
Okay.
which I'm excited for.
You should get a go-kart. I'm going to do a shifter race at Mostport 2 weekends from now.
Shit. Oh,
Yeah.
nice. I've
Yeah.
only driven a shifter cart once, and it was so powerful and so much torque and so fast.
Yeah, I'm super nervous. I've raced an 80 a bunch, but yeah, I've driven a 125 once, and now I'm in a race. So
Oh, wow. Have so much
yeah,
fun.
yeah.
How long is the race? Is it like an
Uh,
endurance race or is it a sprint race?
no, it's a sprint race, thank God, but it'll be an endurance race for me. I think it'll be like 16 laps, and I'm gonna be falling out of the seat.
Dude, it's tough. So, one of the silver linings of not actively pursuing racing, like I still work out regularly and I still stay fit, but now I just work out to be healthy, not to be actively strong, to be able to withstand the heat of a NASCAR stock car. And a little while ago, there was a thought that I might go do a race, and I was like, oh shit, I gotta start exercising again. And I did like a week of my more normal racing workouts, and I was so sore. Like getting out of bed every morning was just absolutely terrible. So, yeah, it's getting old sucks.
Yep, yep. Well, I appreciate you coming on. And I ask at the end of the podcast, I ask a question for the guests for some advice. So, what advice? And you can spin it and expand on it if you want. I guess advice for young women pursuing either motorsports or just a male-dominated sport or career.
Great question. One bit of advice that I would have, that I know that there's research that women don't do this as much, is to always ask for what you want, or for the invitation, or, I don't want to say insert yourself in the situation, but always ask for the opportunity. People are not mind readers. People might not be thinking about what your best interest is, but never be afraid to ask. Always, whether it's an invite to a networking event or to be able to meet with someone, ask for an introduction, vocalize what you need. I think that's something that women don't tend to do as much. And pump yourself up. I think there's a lot that tears. I mean, not just for women, that's for everyone, but like be your own biggest cheerleader and remind yourself of all of the badass stuff that you've done, like all the tangential stuff, all the main stuff. And I think also really try to find a good support system. Like
Mm,
have those outside cheerleaders, like whether it's family, whether it's partners, whether it's friends, but like the people that will help you when you cannot be your own coach. I think that's important for everyone, but yeah, that support system that thinks you're the best, that will always be cheering for you, that will encourage you when you're feeling a little bit of self-doubt. I think that's absolutely crucial.
right. No, that's a good answer. Tell the people where they can find you, your podcast, all of the above.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm at Julia Landauer at most social media, and my podcast is If I'm Honest with Julia Landauer. And Gary, this was so much fun. Thank you. Great questions, and for digging into more of the philosophical stuff, because life's all about that and adjusting and
Absolutely.
growing. So thank you so much for having me.
That's why I do it. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks.
All right, take care.
Bye.
See you guys next week.